Coming Back by Winslow Swan. Audiobook narrated and produced by Edward James Beesley.
Come on in, Frank.
Frank Davis stepped into the modest home of his longtime friend Jim Rawlings. He had been there many times in the past 2 years, mostly every Thursday night, to play chess. Frank had been the best man at Jim's wedding, had helped the couple pick out their home in which he now stood, and had been there to help when Nancy had fallen apart 3 years ago when her longtime lover and fiancé had been killed. It was that fact that had sealed the deal of a marriage between Jim and Nancy. Jim had also been there to help pick up the pieces when the news of Jerry's death had been announced.
"So, Jim,"
Frank said as he sat down on the sofa in the living room,
"what's the occasion? It's not Thursday, and I'm not aware of any birthday or anniversary."
You want a drink?
Jim asked.
"No,"
Frank said slowly, really looking at his friend and noticing the dark circles under the eyes and the lines of worry that had etched themselves onto Jim's face.
"Looks like you could use one, though."
Jim poured a large whiskey and drank it in one gulp. He gasped slightly from the strong liquid.
"Any better?"
Frank asked.
No,
Jim said, pouring another. Jim sat in the easy chair across from Frank heavily. He began to nurse the second drink, although Frank could tell that it might have been a fourth or fifth.
"So, what's the problem?"
Frank asked.
Jerry.
"Jerry? You mean Jerry Stevens?"
Jim nodded.
"But Jerry's dead,"
Frank said.
Yeah, I know,
Jim began.
I know all too well.
"Wait a minute, Jim. Now we all believe that he's dead because his car was found at the bottom of the ravine, but his body was never recovered."
Yes, I know that is what we told Nancy,
Jim said, taking another sip.
"What are you trying to say?"
Frank asked. Jim took a heavy breath and said,
I can't get Nancy out of it. She won't go out. She won't leave the house for anything. I knew going into this marriage that it was going to be a long shot. Now, I went in with my eyes open, knowing that she would always love Jerry. I thought that maybe, after a little time, she would grow to love me. I was wrong.
Frank looked at his friend and could see the pain. He had known from the beginning that the marriage was simply a quick fix for the loss of Jerry, but had decided not to say anything. Now he wished that he had.
"Look, Jim,"
Frank began.
"I don't know what to tell you. You could always divorce her."
Now, it isn't that, Frank. Nancy has been brooding for the past 2 weeks. She told me tonight that...
"Well, go on,"
Frank coaxed.
Jerry is coming back.
The statement hung in the air like a heavy cloud. Frank smiled, saying,
"You mean someone's found him? He had the car wreck and was able to walk away? Man, maybe he lost his memory. I've heard of such things happening."
No, Frank, you don't understand. I know that Jerry is dead.
Frank frowned.
"What you talking about?"
Frank asked. Jim looked down at the drink in his hand, watching the liquid swirl around. Without ever looking up, he said,
I know that Jerry Stevens is dead because I killed him.
Frank had nothing to say to that. He had known that there had been a rivalry for Nancy between Jim and Jerry, but murder was something that he could not wrap his mind around.
"What do you mean you killed him?"
Frank asked. Jim finally looked up, his face a haunted mask, and said in a fearful voice,
Killed him, murdered him. Don't you understand the meaning of the word?
"Well, calm down, old buddy. Look, just tell me what happened."
Jerry was only after Nancy because of all the money that she had inherited from her father. He told me so that night he had come over to my home on the Upper East Side. He was laughing about how he had managed to win her over, that I would no longer have a chance. I threatened to tell Nancy about it, but he only laughed harder. I don't know what came over me. All I know is that 1 minute he was laughing, and the next minute he was dead.
So, what do you do with his body?
Frank asked.
Burned it in the furnace.
Jim said, his voice cold.
Don't you see, Frank? I had no choice. He never would have made Nancy happy. Not like I could have.
Well, she doesn't seem to be happy now from what you said.
No, you don't understand,
Jim said, finishing his drink and pouring another. His eyes were beginning to glaze over in an alcoholic haze.
Well, then make me understand,
Frank insisted.
Give me a reason why I shouldn't call the police right now.
Because he's coming back.
The silence in the room was deafening.
What do you mean?
Frank finally asked.
A few weeks ago, Nancy said that she had seen someone that looked like Jerry. He was just turning away from her and walking around a corner, so she only saw him for a moment. She was in such hysterics that it was all I could do to calm her down. Then, last week, she said that she had seen the man again, only she was sure that it was Jerry.
But it couldn't have been because you killed him,
Frank said.
Well, Nancy doesn't know that,
Jim told him.
She thinks that he could still be alive. Though I finally convinced her that it was only someone that resembled Jerry. She argued with me, told me that I could never understand true love. It hurt me, Frank. It really hurt me. I tried to hurt her back by telling her what Jerry had said to me the night I murdered him. She only laughed. She said that she should have never married me, that she only did it out of a kindness to me. I could have
killed her?
Frank asked, his eyes intense, looking at what he had considered to be his best friend.
Have you killed her, Jim? Is that why you asked me over?
Oh, don't be stupid, of course not.
Then why did you ask me over tonight?
Frank asked. Jim stopped pouring his drink and took a rather long swig from his glass. He felt the hardness hit his stomach, giving him another shot of courage. Turning to his friend, he said,
Because, Frank, Jerry is coming.
Frank was speechless.
But you said...
Jim waved his hand.
Yeah, I know. I have confessed to killing a man, and now I'm telling you that the very same man is on his way here tonight.
The two men looked at each other.
Jim, I don't know how many of those you've had tonight, but...
I know it sounds crazy. Don't you think I know that? But Nancy has been saying for the past week that Jerry is coming. She claims that she saw the man again just a few days ago and that he turned to face her. She said that it was Jerry, that he had been in some accident and that he would be coming home tonight.
Frank could only look at his friend.
I think I will have that drink,
Frank said, raising off the sofa and heading towards the bar.
Do you really think it is Jerry?
Frank asked as he poured the whiskey into a glass.
Of course not. It has to be someone, though, doesn't it? Someone who knows what I did that night, that might be trying to scare me and blackmail me or something, right?
Sure, that's a possibility,
Frank said.
Now, it's what Nancy told me earlier this evening that made me call you,
Jim said, sitting heavily back in the easy chair.
Why did she tell you?
Jim looked up at Frank, his eyes wide with cold fear, and said,
Nancy said that Jerry told her that he wanted to make sure that I was going to be home, that he wanted to see me, and that we had some unfinished business.
But you know that can't happen, right?
Frank asked. Jim only sat, not saying anything.
Jim, you said that Jerry's dead, that you killed him, that you burned the body, so he couldn't very well come walking up the drive and come inside now, can he? What about his car?
I drove it down the canyon myself, wrecking it and then walking home,
Jim said. Well, fine. So, you set up an accident, committed a murder, and married the girl, and now...
Now, her first love wants to see me,
Jim said.
But did the party give a specific time of arrival?
Frank asked, wondering now if his friend was playing a horrible joke on him.
Don't laugh. This isn't funny.
No, I agree,
Frank said, putting his half-finished glass back onto the bar.
It is far from being funny. Jim, I don't know why you think that I am the dumbest person in the world to fall for such a story. Jerry's car was found wrecked. His body wasn't recovered, which leads me to believe that he was hurt very bad, crawled off into the woods, died, and was subsequently, eaten by something. Or was hurt very bad, caught to a hospital where amnesia took over, and now that he is cured, he wants to return to Nancy. To take any of that and create some sort of lurid murder story out of it is beneath you, Jim.
Please, it's almost 9. 5 minutes, and then we will both know,
Jim pleaded. Frank sighed.
All right, Jim. I'll give you 5 minutes. But if you've hired some creep to come bursting through the door to scare me, well... So you see, Doctor, I'm not crazy. You can just let me go.
The door to the small cell closed with a loud clang as Dr. Emil Craig walked down the hall. His visit with the inmate was almost always the same strange tale told over and over again.
Hiya, Doc.
Detective Gray greeted the doctor as he entered his office.
It's just not possible,
Dr. Craig told the detective.
Look, I was there. I know what I saw, and the pictures don't lie,
the detective said. The strange occurrence had only taken place the night before with a frantic call to the police.
Yes, Frank Davis, now your patient,
the detective began,
called into the operator that a man was being killed, in his words, burned alive. That is what Mr. Davis keeps telling me. What I want to know is, what did you find? That's the strange part. When we got there was Davis, curled up in the corner of the room, and 2 burned stiffs on the floor. One was identified as Jim Rawlings, the owner of the residence. What about the other? That's the weird part. Coroner says the stiff is over 3 years old, and according to dental records is Jerry Stevens. And who is Mr. Stevens? Well, from what we gathered, he used to be Mrs. Rawlings' fiancé until he disappeared some time ago. His car was found wrecked, but he was never found at all. Until now. So what is this Davis fellow telling you?
The detective asked.
That a man covered in flames burst through the door at exactly 9 o'clock, ran toward Mr. Rawlings, and burned him alive before collapsing to the floor.
The 2 men shuddered.
What about Mrs. Rawlings? Where is she?
The doctor asked.
Dead,
the detective said.
She'd been strangled earlier that evening. 3 dead and 1 driven out of his mind,
the doctor said.
Are you sure that he is crazy?
The detective asked.
Of course. He killed the woman upstairs, set his friend on fire, and then threw in a corpse to throw us off any resemblance to a rational story. It had to happen that way, right?
The detective only nodded. Epilogue. The butler did it.
Have you heard any good books lately? Audiobooks from Winslow Swan, now available on Spotify.
Hey guys, this is Crimson.
And this is Swan. And we'd love to know what you think of the stories.
Even if it's bad.
So leave us a comment.
Or give us a thumbs up.
Thank you.